Welcome to our first Women's Soccer Weekly here on SDH. My name's Jason Longshore. Joining me for our first edition, Lauren Glancy, Director of Programming at Soccer in the Streets. What's going on, Lauren?
Just living the dream. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Anytime. We're going to get into the U.S. Women's National Team and how the year started for the national team. Loss in France, win in Spain. Experimental lineups. I think there was a lot of kind of seeing what is going to be the best 11 and best 18 for the women's national team. So we'll get into all that. But first, because we have a chance to talk to Lauren and talk a little soccer in the streets, what's 2019 looking like with soccer in the streets, and especially on the girls' side?
So program-wise, we are really trying to create these hyper-localized soccer villages or ecosystems where the kids don't have to travel very far to get to practice. They can walk, they can bike, but then connecting them through transit and connecting our leadership groups to each other through transit as well. So a big focus outside of the soccer side of things is what we're delivering is financial literacy as well as a referee apprenticeship program where we employ youth to support their own soccer village. But on the girls' side, we're pushing to create equal opportunities for both boys and girls. And we've actually, as a program team, sat down, and one of our goals for 2019 is to create single gender teams at the grassroots recreational levels, where in the past it's been mostly co-ed. And so by doing this, I think we'll be able to grow the game on the girls' side, especially at the grassroots level, but also by identifying female coaches in those communities and training them to be coaches, or if they're already coaches, having representation to further empower those girls to continue to play. On the girls' side, that's our goal in 2019.
What have you seen with the idea of going to single gender? I think with recreational, a lot of times we've seen co-ed teams, generally up through middle school. Definitely once you get to high school, it becomes single gender. But what do you see as the benefits to doing that at younger ages?
Specific to soccer in the streets, I think the neighborhoods in which we're programming and have our soccer programs, culturally, I feel like it's a more male-driven sport, where a lot of the times when you get to 8, 9, 10 years old, you see a drop off at that grassroots level, where if there was an equal opportunity where it was just girls and they felt more comfortable with each other, you would see more participation and more engagement. And I think the girls enjoy it more when it's just single gendered. But also you have, when I was younger, I was always the girl playing with the boys, and you still have those in those neighborhoods, but they're far and few between. So by offering single gender teams, I think we would increase participation and just enjoyment of the game in general.
It's an interesting conversation on the youth side, and I think this is something that U.S. Soccer and U.S. Youth Soccer and AYSO and everybody who's involved in the youth soccer space really needs to have more of, because I think you're looking at it in a completely different way than maybe a traditional view has been, and I love that, because I think as the game gets so much more diverse in the United States, you have different cultural effects to it. And I think just culture in general has changed beyond that. But it's kind of a new world, and it's time for a new world to look at it and a new view of it. So I love it. I think it's a really cool aspect of what you guys are doing at Soccer in the Streets right now on that. And I can't wait to see it continue. Give everybody a little bit of your background as a player and what led you from playing with the boys as a kid to now directing programs for a nonprofit of Soccer in the Streets.
Okay. Growing up, the only thing I ever wanted to do was play soccer. my family tried to get me to try different things and I just wasn't having it. All I ever wanted to do was play soccer. I started coaching. I was my brother's coach's assistant for his team. And then like through high school, I worked summer camps and I loved the game. I wanted to be a part of it at all different levels. I played at Top Hat growing up and then, in high school. And then I played at the University of Georgia for 4 years. And I got into teaching because from a young age, like I love working with kids. I love working with younger people than me and being able to teach them. And just when that light bulb goes off in their head, like it finally clicks, like that's why I do or got into teaching and coaching. And that's why I got into this field, I guess. I taught for about 4.5 years. And then I was actually introduced to you through Billy Hale and Alex Cortina for a different role, which would have been like managing our events, which there aren't really a lot of kids involved with that. I'd be supporting the system, but it just wasn't for me. And then, with the incoming MLS team, there was more opportunity to grow the game in Atlanta public schools. So I came on and started managing our after school programs with APS. And just, I feel like in the past 2.5 years, I've had like 3 different job titles with Soccer in the Streets.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. But it's been a fun ride. And like, I've learned so much about, like you think a lot about, I thought I knew a lot about soccer, but like getting into it, like from the grassroots level, like from the grassroots and up, like I've learned a lot over the past few years, just about like the landscape of the sport in the United States in general. And I'm just like continuing to learn, and it's been a wild ride. It's combining 2 of my favorite things, like kids and soccer. And being able to do that for a job is pretty awesome. Not a lot of people wake up every morning and love what they do.
Absolutely. That's definitely a lot of that kind of learning about how the whole picture of the game in this country is set up is something that we get into a good bit on soccer down here, and something from the girls' perspective that I want to touch on more and more as we go with this show, because youth soccer in the United States, I think it's so different than when, you and I were growing up and played in clubs and played more in a neighborhood, and it was, just a different time. And now, on the guys' side, you do have development academy producing professional players. And on the women's side, it's been a little slower, and you have more, I think, political battles with ECNL and the Development Academy for U.S. Soccer, and how all that's going to shake out, and how NWSL clubs are going to invest in development. There's a lot of things, I think, still to come. And, you being in the role you're in, you really have an opportunity to see it at the grassroots level. And I think, honestly, inform that conversation that people need to have at the top levels. So hopefully that's something we'll be able to explore more and more. But let's start with the topic at hand today, the U.S. women's national team. First 2 games of the year, on the road, in France, in Spain. The French, I think to say they're among the World Cup favorites is pretty clear. They're hosting it, but also just with the talent that they've been able to develop in recent years, it's a great team. Spain is one that this was the first time the U.S. and Spain had ever met at the senior women's national team level. And Spain is a country that has invested heavily in development on the women's side, and it's showing. What struck me about these 2 games was something that was mentioned by the EqualizerSoccer.com and Jeff Kassouf, who covers the women's game in a great way. I think the time that national teams at any level, whether it's a Spain who's ranked, in the top 20 and a France who's in the top 5, I think the time that any team faces the U.S. and is afraid and decides to sit back and defend, it feels like that time might be over. And now the U.S. has to adapt to that. This is a new challenge for Jill Ellis going into this World Cup that maybe we haven't really faced in a big way before.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so, but I think looking at it from all levels. So if you look at the 17s, right? So they just had their World Cup, and to be honest with you, they're not performing.
No.
Like the rest of the world is catching up, and I think these other countries are investing in the development of the women's side. And I think for a very long time, we had that opportunity to kind of be out in front, and I think these countries are catching up.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the France game, which was a 3-1 loss, and the U.S. goal was at the very end, meaningless goal in that match. It was a dominant performance from France. I mean, the U.S. really wasn't even in that match, and it wasn't the first choice 11. You know, when we dig into that, you know, it's not the lineup that you would expect to see in Game 1 of the Women's World Cup this summer. But you see a player like Emily Fox, who was playing on the left side, who is still in college, playing at the University of North Carolina, top program, but she was exposed at different times in this match. You're playing against full professionals, and you're playing against players that, you know, you mentioned the 17s. The U.S. women's youth national teams have struggled in recent cycles, while France, for one, has been outstanding. And it's starting to show in these types of situations where it's a professional against a college player, and there's a difference.
Right. And it would be nice to have that depth and experience. I know, so who were we missing? So in Spain, we had Rapinoe, Ertz, and Heath,
Right.
and Lavelle, and so in Dunn. And so I think having that experience in your starting 11, and I know in the France game, there was a release that a lot of the starting 11, those were the starting 11 due to injuries. So going into like the first game of the year, how can we prevent that, I guess, or like just have more depth in our bench. But I think it trickles down, or like it starts from the bottom. It starts with the youth and up.
Yeah, 100%. Because if you're not producing those players to step into the women's national team program, then when you have an injury, you know, you get exposed. And the France game was interesting because you play Fox at left back, and there was, you know, a struggle. It was one of her first caps. It's completely understandable, but it was an issue. And you also played Crystal Dunn in the central midfield, which is a role where you do have a lot of depth. You know, when Julie Ertz is in the team, she's maybe one of the most important players to, you know, the success of the group. What do you think about Crystal Dunn, though, as an outside back? Because when she broke through, we saw her up top. We've seen her scoring lots of goals. You have a lot of players who can do that with the U.S. women's national team. Alex Morgan's been on a tear in the last couple of years. Kristen Press looks to be getting back to her top form, and she played well in these two friendlies. Dunn has been a player who has become an outside back, maybe somewhat because of that log jam and because of the unique skill set she brings. Do you think that's her best position with the women's national team?
Honestly, like in the formation, like the system they play, I think she would be an ideal candidate for that position. You know, with a 4-3-3, her getting forward. I know she play, she plays for the North Carolina Courage, right?
Right.
But I think just kind of like her skill set and like what she could bring to the team, I think she is a stronger outside left back. I think she's definitely like a 3. But in the France game, I think they were utilizing her in the midfield because of the numbers of like who they didn't have for the game.
Sure.
And I don't know, maybe like, I don't know if they did that. Were there other reasons for not having the starting 11 they had in the Spain game?
That's a good question because it was only a couple days later. You know, if there were injuries, how serious were the injuries? I think it could be, and this is something that I don't know if Jill Ellis will ever really say, but it could have been a little of two things. It could have been an opportunity to test some players in different roles. Okay, can Dunn help me in the middle of the field if I need to get there? If I feel like, maybe Fox is the player at the left side and Kelly O'Hara you expect to be back for the World Cup. Maybe it's a little bit of a test of that depth, and maybe Dunn can give you something else in the middle of the field. Also, I think it's a way just to test the team. I mean, they were coming in on, a 26-match unbeaten streak, and we've watched a lot of these matches, and it hasn't been the dominant performances from the last cycle or the cycle before that or from earlier times with the U.S. women's national team. There's been some struggles in that, even though they've stayed undefeated. Maybe this was an opportunity to, in some ways, challenge them and take them down a notch and give that urgency that maybe they've been lacking here lately going into this year, where there's a very good chance that your World Cup quarterfinal is U.S. and France in Paris.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about Morgan Bryan in the France game?
I like Morgan Bryan in general. I think the question is going to be, okay, what are the absolutes about this lineup going forward? Is it 4-3-3? Is it 4-2-3-1? That's pretty much the same thing. It's not a huge difference. It's a little more mentality. But who are the absolutes in this lineup? I think Alex Morgan up top is your first choice. That's who's starting. That's your center forward. Done. Okay. Julie Ertz as your 6, I think, is done. I think that has to be who you build around there. How many other of those do we know? And if it's Ertz as the 6, does it work to play Ertz and Bryan together? I think it does. I think Bryan gives you some of the things as an 8 that Ertz, coming from center back to play in midfield, she's very athletic, but is she who you want to launch your counterattacks? Maybe not. Maybe that's where Morgan Bryan can be the player next to her that gives you that. Bryan's just been a little inconsistent. And I think that's the biggest thing for her in 2019, especially with She Believes Cup coming up, which will replicate a group stage of the World Cup. You need more consistency with her, and maybe you need more consistency with her and Ertz playing together.
Right.
Who's the number 10 for you, though? If we're going to build it that way, okay, if we say that Ertz is the 6 and we want to see Morgan Bryan as the 8, what do you do in front of that? And 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, you can mix and match between the two, but you need that attacking player who is behind Alex Morgan, who can support her, but also be protected defensively. And if you have Ertz and Bryan, you feel like that's there. Do you play Rapinoe inside, or can Rapinoe still play out on the wing? Is it Kristen Press playing as a more of a 10 role, or kind of a second forward? That's a big question for me that I don't know how Jill Ellis is going to answer it just yet.
Right. And to be honest with you, I don't really know how to answer that either, because I'm kind of biased when it comes to the number 10, because that was like...
What's your biases about the number 10?
Because I used to be a number 10, but I'm washed up now.
That's okay. I think we all want to be number 10s. I think that's the position we all want to play. You played it. Yeah. What do you want to see out of the 10 with this team? What does it need?
To be honest with you, I see Morgan Bryan more as a number 10.
Okay.
Not an 8. I think she's like attacking minded. I think I agree with you that she's been inconsistent. But I see her in that role more than, I think you keep Rapinoe outside. I think you keep Heath outside, Morgan up top, Press. I mean, maybe move Press inside as a 10. But I just see her like following her, like for the past like couple of years, like over time, like I think she's a very like attacking minded person. Connecting with the front line as well as like getting in herself. So I'm a little biased. I don't know.
Hey, now we can get creative with this because this is something that's going to come up with Atlanta United a lot. When you look back at Frank de Boer's Ajax teams, he
Yeah.
played with one holding and two in front. And whether you want to call them two tens or two eights or an 8 and a 10, whatever, you can do that. So you could easily see a situation where it's Julie Ertz, more by herself in front of the back four with Morgan Bryan as one player in front. And then who's the other? Another name we haven't mentioned is Rose Lavelle, who is a player who I think some have penciled in as that type of role. A young player, a very creative player. You think she's ready for that?
Uh, she's only, I mean, I think that goes back to the experience, I guess. I feel like it's half and half that half the roster is experienced. They've been at that level where, there's younger ones coming up. And I mean, why not? Why not try it? But she is kind of young, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This is a weird spot for the defending champions to be in, I think. I don't think we're used to this number of questions about what your first choice 11 is with 6 months before the tournament starts. It feels a little weird. You have the She Believes Cup coming up, and that's a really unique thing. If you follow the men's game, you don't normally get an opportunity like this where, one, you're playing top flight competition, but you're also doing it in a group stage kind of format. So you basically get to like practice what your group stage would be. I think we'll learn more there, and we'll learn a little bit more about how Jill Ellis looks at this lineup and what it could be on the opening day of the tournament. But Lavelle, Bryan, Ertz, Press, Rapinoe coming inside, although it looks like she's going to play as a winger. I think those are probably your 4 for 2 spots. And if one gets moved out, what does that mean for Megan Rapinoe, for a Tobin Heath, who, for me, are as close to locks as you can have right now on the wings? I think Tobin Heath is such a vital part of this team, and her creativity has to be on the field somewhere.
Absolutely. My last game I ever played was in the NCAA tournament against UNC, second round, and she was actually playing like a central midfielder role.
Right.
And I don't think that they'll do that. They'll move her inside, but I think she's a definite staple of the starting 11 for sure.
In your mind, is she one of the most technically gifted women's players we've ever had?
Yes, I remember going to. So we're the same age. So I remember going to ESP camp.
Mm-hmm.
And was it ESP? No, it was a camp in Deerfield. It was a national camp. I think I was like 14, and I just remember we were doing this like technical activity where like you had to receive it, bring it down, and serve it in. And she was like just as good on her right as her left, and her left as her right. Like it was like she didn't have a dominant foot. And we were like 13, 14 years old. And I just followed her. Like I have followed her career. I'm not a creep, I promise. But like she technically, like on the ball, she is like one of the most like gifted people like I've ever seen or played against or watched play.
It's really cool to watch Tobin and Megan both, because technique, I'll put both of them up there against any player, male, female, doesn't matter. They are unbelievably skilled on the ball. And to have both of them together in this team gives the U.S. kind of an out at any time. I mean, if you're in trouble and you can find either one of them on the field wherever they are, chances are they're going to be able to make something happen. That's what they've done for their whole careers. Let's talk about the defense a little bit, though, because lots of options going forward, what that's going to be.
What do you think this back line looks like? What do you think the goalkeeper situation looks like? And is that anything to worry about for this team going into the World Cup?
I mean, I think just from these first two games, I think there's a solid 3 of 4 of their back line. I think that left back position might be up in the air. And to be honest with you, I think Dunn was actually pretty solid back there.
Right.
But I think that anytime like you're building out like a team, like that should be like your most consistent line. And I think that they have that. And I don't know. I don't see that changing too much.
So probably a center back pairing of Abby Dahlkemper, Becky Sauerbrunn, Crystal Dunn on the left, Kelly O'Hara when she's healthy on the right. That's probably what you can pencil in.
Do you see, but okay, so what about Emily Sonnet?
It's a good question because she played on the right in the match against France. Is she going to be the player that keeps Kelly O'Hara out? Because Kelly O'Hara is coming off an injury. There's always a question as to where, how soon does she get back? Is she going to be 100% fit? Is she going to be match fit? Is she going to be sharp? You're going to have matches between now and when she is there for players to stake their claim to that spot. And I think Emily Sonnet's in the conversation for sure.
Yeah, and I think Kelly probably brings the experience to the table, but I think, Emily Sonnet, she's been performing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how that's going to pan out. Maybe in the She Believes Cup, like we'll find out. We'll have a little more insight into who's going to be at that too. But I'd be interested to see if like she beats her out for that position.
I think another one to keep an eye on is Tierna Davidson as well. Another young player from Stanford who has played, a variety of positions on the back line. Maybe this isn't her World Cup. Maybe 4 years down the road, it's her World Cup. But I think she's going to be an important part of the squad and might have to step in a variety of roles. I think it's going to be important because you're going to need to go deeper than just the 4, more than likely. You never know when injuries happen in a World Cup. You never know when just a loss of form happens. And is Davidson going to be the one to step in? Is it going to be, a player like Sofia Huerta, Casey Short? There's different options here. I'm with you. I think She Believes Cup is where we start to see, okay, is there a consistent 4 in the back that we see working together? Because you need that continuity. And if O'Hara steps into it, she can step into it. She has the experience. She also has the personality, too, that I think you kind of need, that drive, that aggressiveness in some ways that maybe you don't have a lot of in this group. I think she gets back in if she's ready to go. If she's not, who's it going to be? And who's the rotation? Who's the depth here? She Believes Cup is really important on the heels of these two games where disappointing against France, good win against Spain, but you're going to see Japan, England, who's the other opponent in She Believes? I'm missing it.
Brazil,
correct. You're going to see 3 top opponents in She Believes, and I think it's going to tell us really where this team is going into the World Cup.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be kind of a test. And I think we'll know more about the World Cup coming out of that.
Here's the other one we haven't mentioned yet. Carly Lloyd. She's going to be on the roster. We know that. We know what she did in the last World Cup. We also know she's nearing the end of her career. Is she the super sub for this team in 2019? Or should she be maybe something more?
I think the team seems like fairly young. And she definitely is one of more senior. I think she might be a super sub, to be honest with you. I think we should utilize her. We should use her experience. And what you were talking about, Kelly O'Hara and her like aggressiveness, I think that's what the experience gives those players, is that tenacity and like aggressiveness. Where if you have like a younger player, I feel like they're more timid, not timid. Like if I'm playing, like if they're playing on the national team, they're not freaking timid, but like,
Sure.
but, I think that's what the experience brings, that like that drive and that tenacity. And I think she's definitely going to have a role. She's definitely going to be on the roster. But just kind of what that's gonna be, like, I'm not sure.
The one that, talking about tenacity, the player that I would love to see where she fits into this group, and it might be off the bench, but maybe it is as a starter in certain matches. McCall Zerboni, coming back from the broken elbow, had an unbelievable year with North Carolina Courage, and she has that. It's something that I think is an ongoing conversation in the women's game in the United States, and it can be displayed in different ways. You know, players who have personality on the field, who, you know, you can't take your eye off of them. Kelly O'Hara has that, because she has that tenacity, that aggressiveness. Megan Rapinoe, Tobin Heath have that because of their skill. Zerboni has that because, as just a ball-winning central midfielder, she's everywhere. She shows up everywhere on the field, and there could be some matches where maybe you can't go with the 6 and 2/8 or the 6 and 2/10s or a 10 and an 8, however it works out in the middle of the field, and you need a little more bite. And Zerboni could be the one to do that. I want to see if she can get back to her top form, because she was a little bit of a late bloomer in the national team.
Right. And the North Carolina Courage team, they're the top team in the NWSL, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they had probably the best women's professional season in any of the leagues we've had last season. They were unbelievable. Won the regular season, won the championship, not quite undefeated, but pretty close. And Zerboni was a big part of that.
How many national team players are on that team? Do you know?
That's a really good question, because it's not as many as you would think. You know, you hear that and it's like, oh, wow, okay, they must have the bulk of the roster. And they don't. And you have to give Paul Riley, their manager, a ton of credit, because it's a group of players who maybe don't get as much attention as they should. Abby Dahlkemper in the back is a big part of it. A player who's been in and out of the national team picture in Samantha Mewis, who I don't know what her role is with the national team in this World Cup. I think she has the ability. She's shown it with North Carolina, but where does she fit? They added Heather O'Reilly late last season, and she was a big addition as they went into the stretch run. McCall Zerboni in the midfield. And then up top, 2 forwards, Crystal Dunn as well, who plays a variety of positions with the Courage, but 2 forwards for the Courage that can't seem to find their way into the national team picture in Jess McDonald and Lynn Williams, who have both been outstanding in NWSL, but they haven't been able to earn that time ahead of an Alex Morgan, ahead of a Kristen Press. And now if Carly Lloyd's going to be an option up top, Carly Lloyd would bump them down the depth chart. McDonald and Williams have been superstars in the NWSL, but can't seem to break through with the national team.
Right. And I would just be curious to see like what that process is to kind of get in there.
Me too. I don't know. It's, you know, we watch an MLS and you see players come through, you know, they start to break into their club team and they get a call up. And right now you have this January camp where it is a lot of MLS guys who are getting those first call ups and that opportunity. It feels like on the women's side, it's a smaller pool of players, and once you get in, you stay in for a while, maybe longer than you should. And if you weren't part of that group when you were breaking in, it's hard to get in the door. You know, Zerboni's one who has, and we'll see what this year ends up being for her. I believe she's 31, so this could be her last World Cup. You never know. But players like Williams and McDonald have been doing it professionally
for a number of years now, Lynn Williams has scored goals everywhere she's been and can't seem to get that opportunity.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
The NWSL, we've talked about it a lot on the show, and it's something that we'll definitely talk about here because it's such a critical year for the league. And I think you hit on it. Just you're talking about the best team in league history, and players like Williams, McDonald, Mewis, Zerboni are the core of that team.
Right.
And they're not getting these opportunities with the national team. What do you have to do? And from the league as a whole, just with the league and where it stands, you're at 9 teams right now. You're in a World Cup year. You're going to have a lot of players miss time with their club teams. You need to grow past 9. You really need to continue to see more stories like the Portland Thorns and the Utah Royals and less stories like we're seeing with Sky Blue, where you have your top 2 players who were drafted in the first round decide, no, I'm not going to play for you. I'm going to go overseas and find a club because of all the problems. It feels like it's something where the league really needs to turn that corner this year, and a successful World Cup run for the U.S. could have a big hand in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's something that, I'd love to get your perspective on this as we wrap up. So you've seen firsthand the effect of an Atlanta United on kids and on kids in the Soccer in the Streets program and kids just playing soccer in the city as a whole. What do you think the impact of a successful women's team would have on soccer in Atlanta for girls?
To be honest with you, I think back to the 1999 Women's World Cup, and the impact it had on girls soccer in Atlanta, girls soccer in Georgia. I think you'll get more participation, more people excited about it. I hope that one day, again, Atlanta will have a women's professional team, and that could be something that, the girls coming up now can strive for. I know when I was younger, we had the beat. I would go to beat games, and being able to see, Cindy Parlow and Brianna Scurry, just those women playing in your own backyard. And it just not empowers. The word empower kind of throws me off, but it just motivates you as a young player to want to work hard and kind of be in that place or be a part of the game at a higher level down the road, whether that's playing in college, professionally, representing your national team. But it gives those girls something to work for, but a sense of pride for their country.
It would be massive, and I think we've seen the growth that the 99 Women's World Cup had. I think the 2015 Women's World Cup as well. It wasn't here, but it was a big deal, and I think it definitely had an impact. I think we're seeing, what the success of a team like the Portland Thorns can have on girls in Portland and in Oregon and in that area. I'd love to see it here, and I think it's something that will happen again because that first version of the beat were really successful. They were more successful than most teams in the league, and they had the backing to continue. The league just didn't. And then the second version, that league had a lot of issues all the way around, and I don't think you can point at how things went for the beat version 2.0 as to the success of women's soccer in Atlanta. I think if it's done right, as we've seen with Atlanta United, soccer can work in this town, and I think it would work just fine on the women's side and have such an impact. And then you'd start to see more players like a Kelly O'Hara and an Emily Sonnet come from, our town and make it to, the U.S. national team or other national teams as well. That's more and more you're seeing players who grew up in the States but have the opportunity to represent a Mexico or a Jamaica who's going to their first World Cup. It really feels like it's growing in a way. It's very cool to see.
Yeah. And, I think in other, like it's developing, like the women's side in other countries is like developing like at a fast rate. And I think it's just going to improve the game. It's going to make us have to improve as well. And
100%.
kind of hold us accountable for that development as well from the bottom up.
Yeah. And it's something that U.S. Soccer and whoever is hired as the general manager of the women's national team program, which it's ridiculous that there's not one yet, but that's another conversation for another day.
Wow.
Yeah, not one of those yet. Go ahead.
So I was at the coaching convention in Chicago this year,
yes.
and the United Soccer Coaches Convention, and my interest lies with like the foundation side, like the grassroots side. So I was going to different sessions, the pay to play model, urban soccer diploma, and such. Mm-hmm. And everyone kept bringing up about how we haven't won a World Cup in so many years and like all of this stuff. And I just feel like the women's side is forgotten about. And it drives me insane. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like 2015, 19, like, yeah, yes, we have won a World Cup. Look at our badge. There's stars on it.
I'm right there with you. Yeah. It's something that I've honestly like tried to make a very clear point when we talk on SDH about U.S. soccer or national teams. It's okay. What do we call them on Twitter? It's the USMNT and it's the USWNT. So that's the U.S. men's national team and the U.S. women's national team. They are two different teams, but they both represent the United States. And it's the success of soccer in the United States is not only driven by the men.
Right.
It's the success or lack thereof is not only on the men's side. And it's not good enough to claim it when, we talk about the U.S. men not qualifying for the last World Cup. It's like, oh, well, our women are good at least. It's like, no. No, our women have been great, and our women now are being tested in a way that they've never been. And that needs to be talked about. Let's not wait till it's a bad cycle or the women don't qualify or something happens. Let's talk about why there's no general manager right now on the women's side, but they hired the men's general manager pretty quickly after the presidential election. That's not okay. Let's talk about why the youth national teams have not been performing well on the women's side and nothing's really changed. That's not okay. Let's talk about the professional league and how it's had some issues. It's had a lot of success, but there's been issues, and you have an ongoing one with Sky Blue that was pointed out pretty strongly at the end of last year, and nothing's changed. The governor of New Jersey owns the team and can't sign first-round draft picks because they'd like to live in a place that's a decent place to live, and they'd like to, have a training table and all the normal things that you think of with a professional team. So it has to be talked about in the same way with both. Otherwise, I think we're all doing a disservice to talking about soccer in the country.
Right. And that's why I'm grateful you're doing this podcast about women's soccer.
It's something that we've tried to do on SDH, and we'll always do because, we look at the game as a whole, and whether it's lower divisions, men's, women's, MLS, overseas, whatever, we're going to talk about it because we want to, grow the game. But we needed to do more because, right now there is a difference in TV ratings and attendance and all that. There are things that drive the game from a conversational standpoint in the country and from a media perspective. Totally understand that. But we have to put more time into this or it doesn't change. It doesn't.
Right. We're actually, Soccer in the Streets is actually, Soccer in the Streets is actually celebrating Girls and Women in Sports Day on Sunday, February 10th from 1 to 3 at the West End MARTA station. So basically the Women's Sports Foundation, the theme this year is Lead Her Forward to celebrate that. And we're going to have a panel discussion. It's the 33rd Annual National Girls in Sports Day. and we're just going to celebrate the achievements of women and girls in sports. But we're going to have Lee Jakes. She played at Northwestern, and she played for the Chicago Red Stars, and she's also one of our staff coaches. We're going to have Janine Willis, who played at Princeton, played on the Canadian national team. She's a lawyer, and she serves on our board. And we're also going to have Farlone Toussaint, who's Atlanta Programs Coordinator for the Laureus Foundation, which we're a grantee for the Laureus Foundation. And this kind of started, this is going to be an annual event for us, but Jill Robbins was kind of she was the spark, I guess, to do this kind of event. The first time we ever did it was last year. And, you know, we spent time talking about Title IX and what opportunities have come from that. For the different people that served on the panel last year. Mm-hmm. So I think it's open to everybody, women, girls, boys, anyone who wants to come. But we're just celebrating women in sports.
And the date, Sunday, February 10th?
Sunday, February 10th, 1 to 3 at the West End MARTA station.
Perfect. That is what we know as a segue. That's perfect. That's how we're going to end this. Lauren, we'll be talking again about all aspects of women's soccer, girls soccer, soccer in the streets, grassroots, professional, World Cup, all of it. We will have a rotating cast of characters on this show, and Lauren is a big part of that cast. So thanks for kicking us off. Appreciate it.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Anytime. We'll be back next week with another Women's Soccer Weekly here on the SDH Network. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. If you have any questions, if you have any topics you want to see us cover, please share them with us on Twitter or send us a message. And, Lauren, how can people follow Soccer in the Streets and you?
If you follow us, it's at soccerstreets.org. You can visit our website at www.soccerstreets.org. Find out more about us. And yeah, just follow us.
Cool. At Soccer Streets on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook as well. However you want to follow, however you do your social media, keep up with everything that Soccer in the Streets is doing there. We'll be back next week. Thanks, everybody, for listening.